Welcome to Ethical Exits, everyone. This is really exciting. So, Ethical Exits, the all things M&A podcast for mission-driven companies. Today, we're super excited to have Sarah Holdeman here, Vice Chair of B Local PDX and the COO of the Impact Collective with us. Sarah, along with her team at the Impact Collective, leverages their extensive experience in consulting, finance, sales, startups, nonprofits, and most importantly, social impact to help businesses seamlessly integrate doing good into their operations, making social impact a key driver of success. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Hannah and I are super excited to have you on as our first guest. So I think the way we want to start off these interviews is we want to get to know our guests. So being our first guest on the pod, we'd like to know a little bit more about who Sarah Holdeman is and the values that you care mostly about and those principles, that guide your life and everything that you do.
Awesome. My favorite two topics, me and my values. So I'm Sarah Holdeman, COO of the Impact Collective. And it's really interesting. I think when people ask me who Sarah Holdeman is, what my story is, I always kind of have this moment where I'm like, well, where do I begin, right? I want to start with, September 24th, 1987. But I think in the context of this conversation, really, I am super passionate about the work that the Impact Collective does because of the experiences that I have had in quote unquote, corporate America. Mm-hmm. Even though I've always rested slightly adjacent to corporate America, and I don't think I've ever actually had a corporate job. So my background is in restaurants and startups. So I spent a long time running restaurants, which I loved. I loved running restaurants so much. And one of the biggest things I loved about managing restaurants is the tangible impact that I was able to have. And that wasn't necessarily social impact, but that was impact on my team and my customers. I also loved the rapid instant gratification of fulfilling a need. Later in my life, when I got into like software sales, those sales cycles, one of the companies I worked for was in higher ed, and those sales cycles are 12 to 18 months long. And I found myself really missing the customer approaches, places an order, you take their money, make them their food, they eat their food, they walk away. It's a very satisfying. And so I was running restaurants for a while, and I worked at Laughing Planet here in Portland. I managed the EcoTrust location for 3 or 4 years, and that was my first real experience with a mission-driven organization. And I loved it so much. I found myself so motivated and so passionate about the mission of the organization. And I realized that I wanted to be able to do that on a larger scale. So in 2015, I went back to school to get my MBA. So I got my MBA from Portland State University, and I had a certificate in social innovation and social entrepreneurship, which is really where I was introduced to the concept of social impact. After that time, I did 6 or 7 years in early stage tech startups, which was a really interesting experience in a lot of ways. And I learned a lot. And I also learned a lot about what I don't want to spend my life doing. Mm-hmm. We'll put an asterisk hoping that none of the founders of those companies ever listen to this podcast. And if they do, sorry, I don't want to be like you. And the purpose of those companies was to increase the individual wealth of their already wealthy, primarily white male investors. I mean, we were selling widgets, right? What can we create that has the highest KPIs? And I would always ask, what's our TED Talk? What are we making up that we're doing for the world? And there always was something. We could make something up. It never was beyond anything for a deck, right? An investor deck to say we have some kind of purpose. So that was always a real bummer. And I found it really hard. I was never somebody who I remember in one of my jobs, this was in one of the restaurants I worked at, I found out that there was an inappropriate relationship happening within a power dynamic. And I was like, oh my God, somebody has to know about this. And I went straight to the top of the chain, and I was whistleblowing. And because I thought certainly, they would want to know about this. And everybody was like, yeah, we know, nobody talks about it. I was so disillusioned, but I never lost that inability to keep my mouth shut, right? When things are happening where I'm like, I don't think this is right, or this doesn't sit right with me. It's against my values. So, in 2020, Rebecca Goldcrump, my co-founder, and we were in the PSU MBA program together in different cohorts. So we had known each other previously, and we came back together and we founded the Impact Collective. And I found out that, I'm sure there are places I could have gone to work where I would have values aligned leadership. But it turns out at that point in my life, like I just needed to be my own values aligned leadership. And so it has been an incredible journey to have founded the Impact Collective and to do the work that we've done, which I'm sure we'll get more into. But, I'm so grateful to be sort of in the driver's seat, both of my career, which means my life as well. And I think the other thing I'll say about my values around this is I also just, man, work is such a bummer for so many people, like, why does it have to be so hard? And I think a lot about like the type of like culture that I'm trying to create right now. It's just me and Rebecca, but we have growth plans. And I think about the kind of workplace that I want to create for people. My husband is an artist. He's a 3D designer. He has really bad ADD and he really struggles with, an in the box 9 to 5. The creative industry is so volatile and he's gone through lots of layoffs, and sort of watching him try to to feel like a failure because he doesn't fit into this tiny little box. I just think about how many like creative people, passionate people, people who aren't, people like neurodivergent people who don't fit in like a 9 to 5 cubicle, like that, those voices are being missed in so many organizations because we're not creating spaces for them. So that's kind of my other like soapbox for what the point of my business is.
Sarah, I think so many people can relate to that. I think we are all kind of late bloomers to this movement and to having an opportunity to work for a profit for purpose company, a company that wants to solve real problems and they care about how you get there, right? The methods and means cannot be separated from the ultimate aim. That's like one of my favorite sayings from Emma Goldman. And, like how you do it matters, right? And you touch on a lot of that, like the work environment that you create, right? You want to feel good about that. Like I've always felt that way, even in corporate jobs when I was running teams. I wanted to be the manager of the best team at the company. I wanted, like, even if like what my team sucked, then a lot of it was business development, cold calling folks. Caitlin can attest. Like yes, I still wanted me to be like the best person for people to work for and to get real true satisfaction out of it and to really give a shit, from 9 to 5. And so many times, so many, in my career as well, you kind of had to turn it off. And Bart Houlihan, he just was on Dart Lindsay's podcast. I don't know how many times Caitlin's going to hear me refer to this podcast, but it was so good.
Good story. You can tell it again, Hannah. 10 times the charm. It's okay.
Bart is so cool, and he just is so concise, and his storytelling ability is just amazing. And he was talking about like how the genesis for the B Corp movement and how awful it felt to go to work and you hang up your coat in your cubicle along with your values. Mm-hmm. It's like you totally disintegrate. You become a different person, right? And I feel that too. Like it has been so rewarding to not do that anymore. To be exactly who you are. And it's funny, it's like you're not you're kind of like just integrating all the stuff that's actually not you. And that's a practice, right? That's a practice. But it's such a privileged one, right? So I'm super happy to be on that journey too, and be around folks like you, because we do just amplify each other, right? There's no one in this space, I would hope not anyway, that would discourage you from trying to do more, right? For finding new ways to make an impact, for finding new ways to solve problems creatively and with a good heart, right? And that just feels good, right? Instead of saying, no, we can't do it that way, we have to do it this way because that's where the profit is. It's like, no, let's really think about, let's incorporate all of our values and be more inclusive and try to really get there in a way that we can feel good about from start to finish.
Yeah. And another piece of it, one of the questions I think was around like my personal values. And one of them is like authenticity.
Yes.
And I think for me, I have been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for almost 15 years now. And so I was 22 when I got sober and really getting into like my career and having like being in restaurants and being really open about like, well, I don't drink, I'm in recovery, all this kind of stuff has become really ingrained in how I engage with other people. And I'm so grateful that I didn't have to like learn how to be my authentic self at work. I have
wow.
created a work around me that allows me to be my authentic self. I'm also so grateful because I know that I am like really privileged to be in a position where I can be open about being in recovery and like I can say, I don't really want to work with clients who wouldn't want to work with me because of that. I don't really want to be
Yes.
in circles that don't want me a part of it.
Yeah.
And because of that privilege, I feel a responsibility to be vocal about it. But I think that it is such a big piece of how, you know, I've had to create like a life around me that allows me to be my full authentic self because I don't know how to not be that,
Mhm.
which, you know, creates discomfort in some arenas. You know, I'm not really interested in, I don't know, I'm 37. I'm not interested in hiding myself.
That's amazing.
Well, that's fantastic, Sarah. You know, there's something else that it's so grateful to have somebody on this podcast who can just be so open and transparent and vulnerable. I think that takes a lot. And I think that also takes a lot, you know, when you're finding someone to do business with. You know, when Hannah had come to me and she said, hey, you know, let's screw this corporate world thing and let's do something. You know, we can go to work every day. We can, you know, lay our heads down on the pillow at night and feel really proud about what we're doing. So it's nice to see that there's other folks out there like you and like Rebecca as well, you know, who are forced for good. And I listened to one of your podcasts recently. I think it was taped a few months ago. And you said something that really resonated. And you called Rebecca, or you referred to her as your business soulmate. It's really difficult to find somebody, you know, especially in business, who has the same values of you and who you can talk to and say, hey, like, I really loved that you did this and I really didn't like that you did that. And to have that type of, you know, companionship in front of the TV or in front of your laptop and, you know, outside of a boardroom as well. And that's something that you don't come across a lot.
Yeah. I think my exact quote was, I don't believe in romantic soulmates, but I do believe in business soulmates. And
that's what it was.
I sent that to my family. I sent it to my family and my dad texted me and said, how does Corey feel about you saying that? And I said, he agrees with me. What are you talking about? He thinks me and Rebecca are soulmates.
I think we just tiptoed into a whole other episode. Okay, we need to
I think
back
so.
with Sarah. Okay.
Yep. You know, it's funny, as an aside, the startups that I worked at before starting the Impact Collective were all run by white men who all told me to never have a partner because it would always end in disaster. And I realized that, like, that's their, not to project, but that's their experience because they haven't figured out how to maturely and openly talk about their feelings. Rebecca and I have weekly rumbles on the calendar, which is like, there's 2 questions and it's, what's something you're grateful for this week? And is there anything sticking out in your heart or your mind that you want to bring up? And sometimes it's like, you know, you interrupted me last week and that was annoying. Or sometimes it's like, I want to talk to you about something. Like, there was like a thing. So you guys can borrow that format if you'd like. We found it to be very, very helpful.
I think that's something that we can definitely implement, you know, in our business practice. And, you know, starting, especially remotely, we're on opposite sides of the country. So sometimes it's difficult to have more clear and concise communication, but, you know, we're making it work, you know, it's a trial and error, but, you know, Hannah gets me, I get her. So
I give you an A. I give you an A, Kaylin.
Would you say give me an A?
I need to disclose, but give me a week. We'll see where we land. Okay.
Yep. It's a journey.
Yeah, don't do it on this podcast right now. Let's take it offline. But Sarah, well, thank you for sharing your journey. We love to see the progression of where you are today and what you've created. So, you know, your work is all about helping businesses, you know, define and measure and really boost their impact. So how would you recommend or suggest companies set up a solid framework just to ensure that their ethical values are intact? If someone was to come in and to evaluate a company and see if, hey, would this be a good fit for us, either a partnership or an acquisition? What are some things that you would suggest looking for?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things, like before you embark on like external, kind of trying to like gauge or score like external partners, is that you have to have a deep and intimate understanding of your own set of values and how you are scoring yourself. So for the Impact Collective, we have an impact scorecard. We do that scorecard for clients and we have a scorecard for ourselves. That scorecard is based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It ties in B Corp questions from the impact assessment and goals that we've set there, so that we're really clear, about who we are as an organization and what it is that we're trying to do and what we care about. My background in like tech startups, I was like employee number 1 or 2 at these companies. And so there were no systems in place, no nothing, right? And so I was given, like, what my title at one of these companies was, like, growth and operations. So just like everything, everything that there
Say
is.
the whole thing. Did you also do
Yeah.
marketing?
And I was told,
Wow.
yeah, totally. Yes. And I was told, like, we need an Instagram or we need whatever. And the purpose of, the only goal of all of those things was to, like, increase our monthly revenue so that we can show investors so we can get more money. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually, frankly, like an extremely simple scorecard. Money. Okay, fine. So for the Impact Collective, we have metrics beyond just profit that we care about. And so we have to have something, running a business is hard. And it's like, there's so many, I could spend 9 hours a day in different like seminars or trainings or, going off on some tangent over here. So if I don't have something that's anchoring me, something that allows me to gut check and say, like, is this a priority? Like, is this something that we really, to me, like I could spend, 10 hours a week doing social media stuff. Social media doesn't get us anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a lead generator, really. It's kind of a feel good thing that gets some dopamine hits, but it's not in line with our core values, and it's not really driving the business forward in a significant way. So, that's something that we use. Rebecca will gently say to me sometimes, like, why is this a priority for you this week? What is it? And if the priority is like, I'm feeling kind of bummed out, I just need some likes on a post to feel better. All right, that's cool too, right? But you have to have something that is grounding you and creating an anchor. So when you're looking at like vetting external partnerships, if you don't have your own sort of like internal rubric for how you are scoring yourself and how you are like evaluating your own priorities, then, that has to be baseline. One thing, I think it was like 6 months ago. So we started the Impact Collective in 2020, and we went through several different iterations of a mission statement. When we first set out, it's like we thought we had a certain mission. And about 6 months ago, we landed on, I was going to say final version, but I don't know. Who knows? We might come up with a different one 10 years from now. But our mission is to empower whole humans and whole organizations to actualize their vision of a better world. And when we went through that process with, there were pieces of our scorecard that were a part of that. There were pieces of like an impact framework that are a part of that. And we sort of broke down every word within that mission statement, and one of the biggest things was to actualize their vision of a better world. It's like their vision. We work with clients who have a vision for a better world. And we've realized that that has become sort of a key way that we're like vetting partnerships and relationships with clients. Like, do you have a vision of a better world? Like, because if you don't, then what are you doing? How are you existing in social impact if there's not some like, and it doesn't have to be this like, fantastical, like, centuries away thing. But if you don't have like a slightly different version, if you don't have like a slightly different version of a better world that you're striving for and that your work is trying to get at, then that's probably not a good fit for us. So for us, it has become a somewhat simplified version of like, how is it that we are deciding whether our clients are values aligned or people we choose to partner with. But I guess I think the biggest takeaway from this question is specifically that if you are not super clear about who you are and what your values are, it becomes really, really hard to vet partners. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing to do is to get clear about
Yeah.
anything, right? And then once you get clear, can you verbalize it, right? And then if you can verbalize it, then how do you protect it? Or how do you think through it? Or how do you explain it, right? And I think that, PSA, Sarah is not an M&A expert, right? Sarah helps put more businesses
There we go.
together
There's the asterisk.
or amplify their impact, right? But in a business transaction, it's so reductionary, right?
Yeah.
There's all these things that just get chopped down into a number, right? Or two numbers. What's your gross profit, right? And what's your top line dollar, right? So what's your SDE? What's your cash flow? What's your top line revenue, right? And that, for the most part, is it, right? That's where most business transactions start. right? And I think what you shared is so important because, yes, of course, that's going to matter. But what else matters and why? And if you don't know the answer to that, there's no chance you'll be able to protect that moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super helpful. I think that adds a lot of clarity and it's just an internal exercise. I know different companies have created different frameworks and sets of questions. Is there one that you would recommend or that is out there for the world for people to look at?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss to not say the B impact assessment is a good framework for
yes,
impact,
of course. Sure.
And it's something that I think for us, I love a good like clickbait blog title. And my favorite one was like, we're not passionate about B Corp. We did a blog. We're not passionate about B Corp certification. We're passionate about the framework for increasing your impact, right? So when we go through the B impact assessment with clients, our goal is not to find low-hanging fruit, easiest points. How do we game the system? Our goal is to create a roadmap that is based on your strategic priorities. And so we work with clients, you know, and we always tell clients that like, we're not like the low cost option. Like we do impact strategy, right? And so if you just want to like get through with like low hanging fruit and all that kind of stuff, we're probably not a great fit for B Corp to get certified. You know, we really work with companies who want to put the effort in for long-term impact. And what's really cool, my favorite part about doing these projects, and we've started doing a lot more, the majority of B Corp certification projects we do now are sprints. So we do a full day in our office where we get through the entire B impact assessment in one day. And it's super fun because we watch teams start to imagine what's possible. We watch teams go, oh my God, I never thought about like, you know, I thought we were sort of engaging our stakeholders, but I never realized that we didn't have like a stakeholder engagement strategy. Like we don't have that formalized in any way. We should really do that, you know, or like we never thought about doing like VTO, you know, volunteer time off, you know, paying for it and getting out into the community. You know, really, I think that the biggest and for any listeners who are interested in B Corp but might think that that's like far away for them, you can go to bimpactassessment.net. You can create an account for free and you can go through the B Impact assessment for free without submitting it. And so, you know, you can go through that to kind of see in all the different categories, like what might we not be thinking about, right? When you're in the day-to-day, in kind of the slog of the business, you know, what being able to like raise up out of that once in a while and get like a higher view and see like what might we be missing is a really powerful experience to have. And then also seeing, you know, it's interesting for us, I think we're coming up on our 2-year B Corp anniversary. And so we're starting to think about our own recertification. And when we initially got certified, there were four founders of the business. You know, we had like, it was a totally different business 2 years ago. Well, not totally different, but it was a drastically different business 2 years ago than it was now. And so we're thinking about, man, you know, what is that going to look like going through this time? What do we want to, you know, and then thinking about, so our next research 3 years from then with potentially the new standards, with potentially a bigger team, you know, I think that it puts bumpers around like who we want to be as a company. So that is a really good framework.
Yeah. And I love that, you know, Bart talks about this too, but how the assessment is designed to be aspirational.
Yeah.
No one gets a perfect score. Most people get like a 50% out of all the points available because it is designed to be hard, right? To achieve, right? And it's built that way and it's designed that way. And I think that's really powerful. So even just leveraging that as a way to have that conversation internally, I totally agree with that, Sarah. I learned a lot going through the assessment. We're just in our first year of business. So we're like, you know, we have to wait a little bit, but going through that also starting as a B, right? Starting as a baby B is totally different than converting to one after you've been around for a while, you know? So that's a much
and that's process. What we always tell people that people ask us, you know, well, I think we're too early. I think we're too young to get certified. You know, the sooner you do it, the more autonomy you have. It's super fun. One of the projects, one of the certification sprints we did last year was with a solopreneur who was like on day 366, right?
Oh, wow.
So she was like just ready for it. And it was like almost overwhelming. She was like, I could do anything. Like I could do any of this. And I was like, okay, you could.
Yeah.
but there was so much, it's so much more like malleable at that point in a business for you to decide who it is that you want.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of power, and Caitlin and I talk about this a lot, and I'm sure you do too in your business. You don't just work with B Corps, right?
Right.
There's a lot of companies out there that maybe want to become more mission driven, right? And they might do that. They might do that via a business transaction. And I think that there is a lot of power to the tail wagging the dog. I think that's actually how most change happens, right?
Yeah.
People are influenced by each other. So I really value this feedback on like, hey, like just start with the basics. Like it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Understand who you are, be concise about it, get clear, be able to verbalize it, right? And then having your staff on board, right? So you can also be held accountable, I think is really important. I think just quickly, I think, one of the things, and also being exposed and having these conversations with the community, I think you learn a ton, right? Like Be Local PDX, their most recent engagement, and Caitlin's going to go to BLD in Georgia.
Awesome.
So I'm super excited for her to be exposed because I just came away with so many ideas. And one of the foundational pieces that I think will carry through for us, and is one of the largest impacts we want to make, is our philanthropic commitment. Right? That is so core to what we do. That is where we really create the world that we want to see, right? And that's the regenerative wealth transfer. We want to be able to recirculate capital that we earn from helping clients at the top of their apex of their journey and recycle that right back into young entrepreneurs who are just starting their impact-driven journey, right? I'm super excited about that. And that really feels good. And I think that's the other piece. It's like when you land on it, you'll know you landed on it because you're psyched, man. You're jacked up, right? And it becomes part of everything you do. As Caitlin and I now, we even put that in our invoices. It's not like, thank you for your business. It's like, thank you for your business. This is what it enables. This is what we really care about. And this is why we're so grateful, for this business partnership, because this is what we're doing with this revenue, right? So that makes a ton of sense. I think, amplifying impact through collaboration is really one of our main theses here at Up and Over, is that we just see that M&A traditionally is just such a dark space, man. It sucks, right? That is actually the seed for the B Corp movement, because Bart got hosed with Ann 1, right? And that transaction did not go well, and there wasn't any kind of protections legally, and there was no such thing as to change your bylaws and stuff. Like, all that mattered if you took on capital is, the highest bidder, that's who you had to sell to, right? Is your fiduciary duty. And now we're in a different space, and I just see so many opportunities for the community to work together, right? Yeah. To quicken their pace to impact and to accelerate their impact. And when you're a mission-driven triple bottom line company, one of the core tenets, is planet, right? People, planet, profits. And I mean, New York Times just published another article today about how we're so quickly pacing to the point of no return. B Corp just celebrated the Earth Overshoot Day on August 1st, where we've used up all of the resources available on the planet for the year. Yeah. And that date keeps moving backwards. So I feel like there's such a sense of urgency, whatever we can do to partner and to work together and amplify each other is super important. That's the first thing, right? Our first thesis. And the second thesis that we have is that transparency in these interactions, right? That oftentimes, even with business partnerships, Sarah, like outside of M&A, just traditional business partnerships, you don't talk to your staff about those things, most typically. Yeah. These are conversations that are being held in the back room and locked rooms, boardrooms, rooms that, to your point earlier, this inclusion, right? Where these non-traditional players are not involved, right? So I feel like that's going to be one of our largest hurdles that we're going to try to overcome. And we'll see how many sellers we actually get to come on the podcast and talk about it. I don't know. Yeah. I'm hopeful, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think that I don't know. I never signed anything, so I don't know if I'm allowed or not allowed to talk about the last startup that I worked at. I'll tell you the story probably offline. But it's incredibly sketchy. Like, and I don't, and it's like it involves large amounts of money being funneled from one person to that person. And I had a lot of experiences in the startups that I was at of being offered equity with absolutely no context for what that meant. Right. So, here's your $30,000 salary and, but you get 300,000 shares of the company. Well, out of how many and at what valuation and with what time, it's like, there's just no, and I think that, I, it felt very, gaslit, frankly. I was going to say swindled, but I think gaslit is the right word, to be like, well, just, it's for the good of the company. It's, for the long-term payout. It's for the, and I was a part of of several different startups and, where's that payout? I don't know. I never got that. And I think that one of the things you brought up, so what I love about what you said is that it sounds like you have a vision for a better world. And so that's very cool. And I wanted to share, so the Impact Collective's vision is that the success of the economy is measured by the strength of the collective. And so one of the biggest things that we think about in terms of our business is not just whether we are hitting our numbers and we're paying ourselves, however much money we want to make. It's, it's like a rising tide lifts all ships. It's like, what about our community? What about the collective that surrounds us? And I think that for me, it's something that I've seen, I won't get too political, but it's like this individualism, right? Where it's like, well, as long as I get mine, then I'm happy. But what about everybody else, right? What about the people around me? And I think too, it's something that like here in Portland, I see a lot. I wish that conversations about like the houseless population and mental health were more collective driven, more community driven, rather than on my individual street there's a bunch of trash. I don't want to see that. It's like, well, what about, what if, like, how can we feel good as like a society when there's some quote that I can't say verbatim, but it's like something about how we treat like the least fortunate, among us is sort of the like representation of who we are as a community. And so I think a lot about, the success of the economy is measured by the strength of the collective. I don't know. Some might call that socialism. Some might call that, but potato, right? It's like I want mine. I want you to have yours. I want everybody to have the lives that they are supposed to live. And that doesn't happen by stepping on the necks of my fellows, right? And so everything that we do for our business is really, about strengthening the collective.
And I love that, Sarah. And I'll give you one quote because I get the gist of yours, but I got another one. It's from the foreword of People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn. And it's the cries of the poor is not always just, but if you refuse to listen to it, you'll never know what justice is. Right? I love that. Right? That's so grounding and so centering, right? Like just to stay awake, baby, and to keep giving a shit, right? Like no matter what, right? Yeah. And to kind of be, glass half full, right? Like believe people, like if like be open, right? Like be humble, like be forgiving, right? And don't lose sight of the cause, right? So speaking of that, you've been, especially because you're the vice chair of Be Local PDX, right? You're involved in this movement. You see these companies, you see all these people doing great stuff in the Pacific Northwest and of course all over the country and all over the world. Now there's like 6,000 B Corps. It's crazy, right? Globally, 6,000 plus. But do you have some like recent examples you can share of collaboration or business partnerships you've seen inside and outside the community where people are really working together in a constructive way to amplify impact uniquely? Yeah.
I think the thing is, if we're talking specifically here in Portland, I think that I would love to see like the Pacific Northwest B Corp community more intertwined with one another. I think I think Build this year was an awesome conference. I think one of the things that Rebecca and I have talked a lot about, everybody talks, I think 3 or 4 years ago at Build, they did this wheel where all the B Corps were on the wheel and you would come up and you would grab a piece of string and it was different colors. I've worked with this
Oh,
company. I want to work with this company. And
oh,
they strung this, and it
cool.
became this like this cool thing.
Yeah,
I would love to see that type of matchmaking sort of
yeah,
more codified into our community. I know that it's, a part of the B impact assessment, when you're working with other B Corps and all of that
yeah.
stuff. I do think that the way that I have seen a lot of B Corps here, specifically in Portland, like partner not just with other B Corps, but with local nonprofits, with local
Mm,
organizations, other mission-driven and purpose-driven organizations who are adjacent to one another, and so that they can amplify each other's impact. I think that, there's one tier where it's like, I give all my money to other purpose-driven businesses,
mm-hmm.
right? There's like a purpose-driven business for everything. I was making a joke, I think it was like last year, where I was like, I wish all my money could go to B Corps, but what am I going to find? Dog poop bags that are made by a B Corp? Yes, there is. And now my dog poop bags come from a B Corp, right? And it's like, there are B Corps and purpose driven and people in Planet First verified and all, there's all kinds of like social impact organizations. So, that's one tier, right? The other is like amplifying and uplifting those organizations. Construct the Present is an amazing organization here in Portland. They do DEI strategy and consulting. So we've worked with them, we've worked for them, the local PDX has worked with them. And now when we have clients who are looking for DEI support, we direct them to Construct the Present. Right? I think it's all of those things. And what you're talking about in terms of like M&A and like investment dollars sort of all staying within like a certain segment and group, I consider it to be like part of my responsibility to direct people's money towards social impact organizations, whether that's my organization or another organization that I know is doing really incredible work. I think within our community, if we're not like putting our money where our mouths are, if we're not directing people's dollars towards these types of organizations, women and BIPOC owned businesses, social impact, purpose driven, it's 2024. It's like, it's not, and especially like, I don't know, sorry, Caitlin, but like here in the Pacific Northwest, in our little bubble, it's like, it's almost, I had somebody say, a couple months ago, there was a conversation with somebody who said like, it's almost like the lowest bar in the Pacific Northwest to like be a B Corp. It's like, it's not special. It's like there's an expectation amongst amongst the community that you are like engaging in social impact and you have some kind of verification around it. I don't know how widespread that is. Maybe that's like a little bit of a bubble kind of comment, but also, I think it's sort of true. I think that the organizations that are partnering to amplify each other's impact as well as their own are the ones that end up, and that's like a long-term relationship that people start to engage in.
Yeah, I love it. And I love your nails, Sarah.
Thank you.
Brat.
Yesterday, I went to get my nails done yesterday. I was like, I'm just like so drawn to this color. I don't even know why. And then I left there and I was like, oh, I know why. I remember.
That was a good call out, Hannah. I was like, why am I so drawn to these nails? I was like,
I know.
Fantastic,
it's like color.
Yeah. Also, Brett. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Well, this segues into the last question that we have for you, Sarah, and we want to, give the platform over to you. So in honor of your participation today on our podcast, which Hannah and I are so grateful for, we want to, shout out in one of your charities, one of your causes of choice, and just something that's really close to your heart that you would like to highlight today. And how can our listeners help support this cause as well?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to shout out Rahab Sisters, which is an incredible nonprofit organization here in Portland that focuses on providing radical hospitality to our houseless community. This is a really deeply personal nonprofit to me. It's one that we've made donations to and volunteered with, but I have my oldest brother is severely mentally ill and also has been houseless here in Portland on and off for the last decade or so, currently incarcerated, so technically housed, which is great. But nonetheless, I think that one of the things that So I work downtown here in Portland, and I think that there's a lot of rhetoric about what it's like downtown. Some of it is really hyperbolic, and some of it is very true, right? We have sometimes I can't believe that we as a society have decided that this is like an acceptable way to treat people who are the most vulnerable among us. I think when I hear people talk about, I just recently heard, a business leader here in Portland talk about how thrilled they were to see all of the trash cleaned up in Southeast Portland. And I couldn't help but wonder, is the trash you're talking about people? Did you ask where they went? What did you ask? What kinds of resources were being given? And so I think that there is a really dehumanizing tone to the rhetoric around the community. And at Rahab Sisters, their focus is on radical hospitality and providing people who are experiencing houselessness with experiences that give them humanity. One of the things that they do is they do like a seated and served dinner once a week. And so people can come in and have the experience of ordering off a menu, being served food. They always have like big bouquets of flowers. It's not like, like you should be so lucky to be able to eat. It's like, let's provide that experience. They provide clothes. They do like craft nights. They do all kinds of incredible work that allows people who are experiencing houselessness to find their humanity. And so I think that the work that they do is so, so, so important. And I love them a lot. So there's their shout out.
Well, that was beautiful. And it's a beautiful organization. I saw something specifically on their website where they said, we provide the necessities for dignity and health, whether that be food, friendship, supplies, or just a shoulder to cry on. And I thought that was really beautiful. So, we're both very grateful that you were able to share this organization with the two of us and also with our listeners. So thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
The commitment we make, right, Sarah? Because everything we do, everything we touch, we want to find ways to give back and to be philanthropic in our efforts. So this is an important part of the podcast, and this is a great first organization to highlight. How freaking rad, man. I mean, how rad is that? That is so cool and likely what folks need. They don't just need a meal. Yeah. They need to be seen. Right? And they need to be treated as humans. So that is amazing. And so thank you so much, Sarah, for that. We'll certainly direct our listeners and Yeah. And I will say too, just the last thing on that, when we think about like impact scorecards and frameworks for how, you partner or put your money to, there's like, when Rebecca and I came together to start this business, there are infinity things that we're passionate about outside of the scope of the services we provide. Yeah. Right? And we recognize that like, within this little circle are the things that we are experts at, that we want to engage with professionally, and that we feel, comfortable and equipped to charge people money for. There are dozens of things outside of that we still want to be involved with and supporting and have an impact on that aren't necessarily within like our core scope. And so these are the ways that we can do that with volunteerism, with, donations, with amplifying messages. So there are 100 ways to make impact. All you have to do is start with one of them. So amazing. And I think that's what's I have to say, like, to bring your human forward, right? Yeah. We're not just robots. We're not just designed as humans to make money. Money is largely a construct, right? Like, so that's so cool and I think such an important message. That was major. Caitlin, that was like the mic drop moment. That is the viral moment right there, baby.
That was a great, line.
That's the last sentence of the podcast.
That was epic. That was iconic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Really enjoyed having you as part of our launch episode. We feel so honored. It was a tremendous conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.